Welcome back everybody to another Motobob Vlogs video. We're at Cardiff Harley again today. Very grateful to them for all their help with bikes this year. They've been absolutely brilliant, and fortunately I've got this amazing sunny day and hopefully an amazing bike to get out riding on, the Sportster S. Now I had a press bike lined up, but Harley told me a few got damaged on the press launch, so they had to cancel my booking, and Cardiff Harley stepped in to get me this one for the day, and you can borrow it too because it's their demo. But yeah, it looks pretty great. I mean, I'll give you a quick walk around. Big fat front tire here, 160 section, Revolution Max engine. This is slightly torquier in its tune, or lower down than the Pan America, but still looking forward to it. And then Brembo brakes, so single disc at the front and rear. That's got a radially mounted Brembo, and then a radial master cylinder as well there, so pretty sporty, and fully adjustable suspension on the front, not loads of travel, and I believe it's fully adjustable at the rear. There's a preload adjuster here, but I think you might be able to do a bit more with it if you take the seat off. High level exhaust, quite a small single seat. You can get a passenger seat. I believe you get a wet bum if it's raining. And then 12 litre tank, so not huge range, but pretty typical for a Sportster. TFT dash, and the same switchgear as the Pan America. Familiar stuff. They've just shrunk the interface into this smaller circle. Anyway, I'm boiling. I've got all my gear on, and I've been messing about filming and setting cameras up. I think I need a little bit of wind to cool me down. Now the dash does have phone connectivity, and you can do a like turn-by-turn nav thing with it, but I'm gonna use Beeline Moto, number one because they sponsor the channel now, which I'm super excited about, but also I've got all my saved routes. I've got a little test route here, 30 miles, takes about an hour, and so I'll take you along for the first part of it. A bit of a shame that they don't have the mid-peg conversion on it. I think it's about 700 quid. I'd much prefer that as a riding position, but well, let's see how we get on with this. They don't look too far forward. I just made a video for Facebook, like a quick walk around, but unfortunately while it warms up they sort of limit revs. Well, fortunately maybe, they limit revs to about 3,000, so it was sounding a bit uninspiring, but now it's properly warmed up. It's way more like a KTM or something than a Harley, you know, that kind of angry revvy V-twin or 890 parallel twin. Very different to what I'm used to from a Harley. Really light on the clutch, which I like. A bit more upright than I was thinking it would be as well. Where do we go here? Right. Thank you, Mr. Trucker. Cheers, mate. Now, I don't have the longest legs, which I think is why I prefer mid-pegs to forward controls, because I do struggle. You know, I'm fine with my toes on the pegs if they're forward, but I do struggle a little bit to get to the controls. But actually, I think I'm all right on this one. They are sort of jutting up in the air a bit, but yeah, I think this feels pretty good. I mean, that 160 section front tire, you know, that's as wide as something like my Triumph Street Twin, which I've sold now, by the way. I'll make another video about my current bike situation in future, but I think that had a 160 rear. Might have even been a 150. So that's a whopper of a front, and it does feel big and chunky, but I wouldn't say too cumbersome. It's I mean, very light bike for a Harley, so I think it's 238 kilos in running order, so fueled up, which is, you know, if you look at something similar like the Fat Bob, which I'm riding later, that's like 308. So it actually feels pretty nimble. I think 70 kilos of weight is more of a, oh my gosh, look at that puddle. Yeah, that's more of a big factor than the width of the front tire for me. What is going on? We must have a burst pipe because it's been dry all night. Oh, good. Whoa! I don't know if you caught that, but that rear spun up then with a bit of a twist of the throttle going up this hill. I think there's a bit of paint on the road. Now, another big difference versus something like the Fat Bob is that this bike actually has TC to step in when that happens. Pretty much all the other bikes just get ABS, but this has got an IMU, so it's lean sensitive with the ABS and traction control. And then you've got 3 riding modes, so rain, road and sport, and also a customizable user configurable as well, so you can fiddle with all the settings. I assume it's the same as a Pan America. I'll have a look in a minute, but engine braking and throttle response and all that stuff. Now, one thing I said on the Pan America review was that it had such a big rectangular dash, yet a fairly small speedo in the middle, and it felt like a bit of a waste of space. But I think, you know, looking at this now, it's kind of obvious what they were doing, because it's a consistent design with this bike. So I think, oh, that was the horn. Where is the indicator cancel? There it is. Yeah, it's obviously that they were designing a consistent interface that would fit here as well as on the Pan America. So although you do have a lot of wasted space around the edges, yeah, you've got that same look and feel. Oh, beautiful day. Look at this. I can see the sea down there. Oh, it certainly is lively. Sport, rain, road. I think it might have been in sport and it's a bit snatchy maybe. That feels better, especially with these patches of wet still on the road. Now, I know this is an obvious thing to say, but especially with my earplugs in today, I really do want more from that exhaust note, and that's not necessarily Harley's fault. But if there was an accessory, and I'm sure there'll be plenty on the aftermarket, then that would be one of the first things I'd look at, because I'm not getting a great deal in the ears. Now, talking to the guys at the shop, they were saying that because you've got this fully adjustable suspension, a lot of the bikes were set up for a more cushy ride when they came in, and they've tried to just middle it out for more of a all-round sort of ride, and also to suit a variety of sizes of customers, because of course this is their demo bike. And what would I say so far? I mean, it does feel like it's sort of, it wants to corner, and it's not wallowy, it's not gonna wobble, I don't think, a great deal through the corners, but it's firm. There's not a lot of travel. The seat padding is thin. Yeah, it definitely does feel on the firm side. Just got to keep an eye on fuel with that 12-litre tank. It says 100 miles range, and we're only doing about 30, so I'd have to do some serious like throttle abuse to run it low. But yeah, 12 litres isn't loads. Oh my gosh, just getting a bit of a feel for like the counter steering. I mean, with that big tyre and the raked out forks, because it is still like a cruiser geometry, it doesn't sort of fall in like you might get on a naked bike. It does pick itself back up a little bit, and so you need to press and then keep it there. Now, I wouldn't say that's a negative at all. It is very stable, and when you're riding like that, well, it's really just a case of like learning how to ride it. Woo-hoo! Wow. Wow. Flipping heck. That sort of real world riding speeds. Oh, there's a lot of shove there. I can see why they dropped the Bronx now, to be honest. So they made this engine, the Revolution Max, they put it in an adventure bike, and then they announced this bike to replace the Sportsters, and also like a naked sports bike called the Bronx. But it's only the Pan America and this that are actually coming to the market. They sort of stopped the development of the Bronx, and it was very much more like a European naked bike, so more upright, regular road-sized wheels and tires and a regular sort of street bike geometry, and I'd still like to have seen it, but this very much feels like a Harley still in many respects. Riding position, the finish, the sort of stance of the bike where it's low slung, big chunky sort of bobber tires on it as well. So yeah, it still feels like a Harley, just if you modernized every single riding component. So engine, brakes, suspension, rider aids. I've cut a few sections out here where, you know, I've just been riding with my thoughts rather than talking, and I think I'm getting a good idea of what it's about. Woo! Definitely got some massive strengths. I really like the engine. I don't think you're going to notice that little bit less peak power versus the Pan America. I think for street use, and if you're not going to be riding two up with luggage on the motorway, then shifting that peak torque further down into the middle of the rev range just makes total sense, and it's super, super lively. Whether it'll float your boat in terms of, you know, the sound, the feel, the way it delivers it, I mean, it depends where you're coming from. I think if you come from a naked bike background, if you come from a parallel twin that's 800 or 900 cc's and above, this is going to feel a little bit more familiar. And I think the problem is sometimes people come from those bikes and they get on a Harley and they think, well, why is it like revving out so quickly? Because they're purely built for like huge displacement, like 1.8 litres, and then producing their peak at like 3,000 revs. It's almost like a bit unsatisfying the way that they die off if you're used to bikes that do have top end. So I think it's quite nice in that respect. As for the Harley diehards and whether they'll enjoy this bike, well, you might have to give it a little bit more throttle. It's thriving up at 5,000 and 6,000 revs as opposed to, you know, 2 or 3. But I think you can adapt and get used to it. It does feel like a smaller bike though. It doesn't feel like a massive lump of American metal, and well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think that's in the eye of the beholder. But one thing is for sure, I think it's, well, for me it's the best handling Harley cruiser anyway that I've ever ridden. Feels sharp, feels light, feels nimble, feels agile despite having the chunky front and laid back ride. And as for any concerns around that single front brake and whether that's enough to stop a 238 kilogram bike that's got 120 odd horsepower, well, for me, it's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's sports bike territory, but for a cruiser, it's definitely got a bit more initial bite than other Harleys I've tried with their own branded brakes, even with twin discs. So really, I think it's only if you were on some proper twisty roads where you're on the gas, then on the brakes, then on the gas, and they might start to fade with it being a single disc. But realistically, who's buying this bike to do that kind of riding? Probably not many people. Now, I put some serious miles in on the Pan America press bike, so I really got to know the instruments and switchgear pretty well, and I found it to be really good, I think. Mode button's easy to switch between. Cruise control, we've got heated grips as well. I like having a directional pad like this to navigate through the menus and stuff. Always found that super easy to do. And look, on a bike in 2021, the other Harleys do feel a bit under-teched. Depends whether you like it or not. I still know that loads of people love bikes that have barely any, and even if they could get rid of the ABS, they would do that as well. But for me, I think this feels more contemporary and up to date, and so again, a big strength. And look, this dash is really nicely done. I think it's compact and it doesn't really ruin the cruiser semi-retro aesthetic of the bike, but at the same time it's got all the functionality, really easy to read, really easy to use. Woo! Flipping it! Absolutely loads to like about this bike. There are a couple of mild tweaks I'd make. I might rotate the switchgear forward a little bit, or I guess maybe the bars, but ideally the position's good, but yeah, the controls feel a bit pitched back, so it's hard to get to the indicator switch underneath there. Limitations that can't be solved. Look, this isn't a bike to buy if you want big, long distance comfort. It's short in the suspension travel, it's firm. You could back it off, but still, that's not what it's really built for, is it? It's built for razzing around and being silly. But overall, I think you'd have to say it's a big success. I mean, the idea is to modernize the Sportster lineup, and you've got to hand it to them. They've done exactly that. It shouldn't really come as like a huge surprise, because the Pan America was like pretty accomplished in terms of tech and the way it rides and stuff. I think for a first stab from a company that's been making predominantly cruisers and tourers for such a long time, it's impressive, the Pan America, but that's a category of bike that is heavily scrutinized in terms of features and capabilities and technology. It's always going to be hard to beat like the GS and the KTMs because they've been at it for a while. So at least Harley've made a good stab at it, but they still got to probably keep iterating until it's like adventure bike perfection. But this bike's inherited a lot of that good stuff, and so for a cruiser, I mean, it just feels like a massive leap forward. Anyway, I'm gonna whip the GoPros off now and just enjoy the ride back, gather my thoughts, and then make my review for the main channel. But I hope you've enjoyed this little spin. I'm taking the Fat Bob later this afternoon so that I can make a comparison video. So that'll be up in the next few days. But yeah, thanks for watching as always. Let me know how you're getting on down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.